In this video, I am going to show you how you can cheat in World of Tanks. And no, I am not talking about those useless illegal mods that some people pay hundreds of dollars for. Most of the time they are a scam and are absolutely garbage. Instead, I'm going to share every single secret trick I learned over the last 8 years of playing World of Tanks. So stick around and watch the video from start to finish very carefully, because by the end of it, I promise that you will become an absolute beast at World of Tanks. For this video, I partnered up with World of Gold. World of Gold is a legendary Android app which lets you collect special codes to get some free gold in World of Tanks. You get to complete different tasks in the app and the selection is huge and it's super easy. Download the app using the link in the description, use my referral code and get 10 gold coins as a bonus. First things first, let's start out briefly by talking about the settings that you absolutely need in order to triumph. I already made 2 videos about the best settings to have, check them out both after this video. The single most important thing that will make your life 10 times easier is enabling horizontal stabilization. I won't say anything, just look at the difference between these 2 clips. Minimap settings are extremely important too. I see so many guys playing with a teeny tiny minimap. Wrong! You should set your minimap to be as big as possible. More about some minimap secrets later, but you also have a bunch of indicators that you should activate. Things like the 50-meter proxy spotting circle, the camera beam and the view range circle are super important. You should also change your fire direction indicator to advanced and enable all options here. This will make pinpointing the enemy's location super easy when they fire at you. You should also set up a customized aiming reticle, change your sensitivity and consider using vertical, but I will show you the super OP settings later in this video, so keep watching. If you have a better PC, you should also set anti-aliasing to maximum. This way the outlines of enemy tanks will be a lot thicker than usual, helping you look for and aim for weak spots. Improving at World of Tanks requires skill, strategy and knowledge. Let's talk about some secret tricks that will make you an absolute gamer. First things first, it is super important to stay alive as long as possible. You shouldn't be too aggressive at the start of the battle and rush into a super risky position if you don't have anyone supporting you. It might work 1 out of 10 times, but you will die in the first minutes and achieve absolutely nothing. You should try to keep as much of your HP as possible in the early game to be able to have a good mid and end game, because that is where most of the damage will come from. Survival rate is the most underrated stat in this game and you should try to keep it as high as possible. Most great players have a survival rate of around 45 to 50%, which means that they are alive by the end of every second battle. This allows them to dish out damage throughout the entirety of the game and they don't miss out on the juicy endgame damage either, so don't YOLO in without the cover of your allies and expect great results. If you notice that a flank you're on is falling apart, you should run away as quickly as possible and take a defending position or change the flank. You will be of more use if you're alive. At the same time, you shouldn't be afraid to trade your HP if you can afford to lose it. If you're in a situation where you can finish off an enemy tank and you can survive taking a hit, you should take the chance. You should always pay attention to when the enemy shoots and take the opportunity to get a free shot in. Also, if you have better DPM than the enemy tank you're fighting, you shouldn't be afraid to use your HP to take them out, as long as you can do 2-3 shots in return for receiving 1. However, this does not mean necessarily that you should snipe from the edge of the map every game either. It makes you look super lame and your allies are not going to be happy about it. Instead, strive to find the healthy balance between early game aggression, where you pick up some juicy early game damage, a healthy mid game where you try to preserve your HP as much as possible while dishing out tons of damage in return, all the way until the late game where you can use all that HP to trade and win the battle eventually. This game you're watching is a great example of this. Our hero might be a gold spamming chief noob, as a lot of you would call him, but this battle you're watching is nothing short of a miracle. The game started out pretty normally, he did some nice early game damage and tried to preserve as much of his HP as possible. After he won his flank, he quickly realized by looking at the minimap that the enemies were swiftly pushing on the remainder flanks. The score might look absolutely tragic, but luckily, Mountain Pass is an insane position that gives you a huge opportunity to carry these kinds of games. After he makes his way back over there, he proceeds by knocking the trees down carefully and starts farming his opponents using the double bush rule, which I will talk later about. What is about to unfold here is nothing short of an absolute miracle. Is he going to be able to win this situation? As our hero is farming all these unsuspecting opponents, let me tell you about one of the most important, if not the most important feature you have to pay attention to is your minimap. The minimap is your best friend. Keep an eye on it throughout the battle to track enemy movements, spot potential threats and coordinate with your teammates. You should make it big enough to see everything that is going on in the battle, and you should try taking a quick look at your minimap after every single shot. It needs to become an automatic habit, like driving a car. This way you can be aware of your surroundings constantly and no surprises can get to you. You can increase the size of your minimap with the numpad plus key on your keyboard. If you are new to the game, test the different positions on the maps you play to understand which one works and which one doesn't. Don't be afraid to experiment and look around. You can also do this and learn faster by watching my YouTube videos where I explain everything positioning wise in detail and use them to your advantage. One of the most important things to learn in order to become better in World of Tanks is learning how to use the double bush mechanic. It allows you to shoot enemies while being completely invisible. To maximize your use of camouflage bonus provided by the environment, do not sit inside of bushes while you fire. Instead, sit more than 15 meters behind one or even several bushes. This is particularly important for scouts. First, wait for the target to enter behind the bush before firing at them in order to not get spotted. You should fire after the bush in front of you becomes non-transparent and you cannot see through it like here. If the target is less than 400 meters away, only fire when you're absolutely sure that you are safe in case you get spotted. Another super important tactic is learning how to line up your blind shots to the targets outside your signal range using the minimap indicators, such as the line showing where your gun points, enemy tank icons, and indicators you can place with the T key. Hey agent, line this. Exactly there. These indicators will show you the distance to the enemy tank and where to shoot them. Once you line them all up, all you have to do is correctly guess the height of the tank and you can already shoot, and if you did all calculations correctly, you will most likely hit. If you truly want to become a better player in World of Tanks, an extremely important skill you need to learn is how to side scrape. Side scraping is a tactic where you peek a corner with your tracks out, all while hiding your vulnerable lower plate. This allows you to check and peek corners without being at the risk of getting permanently tracked and damaged at the same time. You have to make sure that you peek at an optimal angle and not over-angle your side. For most tanks that have a simple angled frontal glacis, side scraping is absolutely necessary for blocking as much damage as possible. There are certain exceptions, namely tanks with pike noses like the IS-3, the IS-7 and T-10, where side scraping actually makes your armor worse, since you're giving the enemy an easier time of penning you. These tanks can benefit from reverse side scraping, which is essentially the same tactic, but you peek with the back of your tank instead. You have to be careful not to show your back though, as it is very weak. You should also learn how to bait shots with your tracks and angled front plate. You can use this on most of the maps when you are trying to fight someone around the corner. You have to be careful not to peek too far out and get tracked on the inside wheel while baiting shots. Use the auto-aim trick. When you're sniping a tank at medium to long ranges, after shooting, lock onto him by using the auto-aim with your right mouse button. This allows you to keep track of him without needing to search for him again. Use your reload time as a window to check your surroundings and minimap. As soon as you're reloaded again, just disengage the auto-aim, manually aim at him again, fire and repeat. You should also check tanks.gg, a website where you can see the armor models and stats of all the tanks in the game. There are many obscure and weird weak spots that you wouldn't expect otherwise, so studying tank models will allow you to surprise your enemies with some crazy penetrations. You should also check your own tank's weak spots so you can hide them in the future encounters. Weak spot knowledge is extremely important and it will massively improve your performance. Another super OP strat is whenever you are faced with tanks that rely solely on angles, such as the Object 268B4 or the Object 279, whenever they are moving, wait for them to bob a little forward. This way their frontal armor becomes a lot less angled and you can pen them 9 out of 10 times if you time the shot correctly. Furthermore, whenever you are facing an opponent, you can actually block their heat and HE shells completely if you manage to put your gun into theirs. This is super useful as they will struggle quite substantially most of the time when faced with this. Although you can't block AP and APCR shells this way, but their penetration will still get reduced since they have to go through your gun, which counts as additional armor. You should be patient and try to use your allies' HP to further your game. Don't take shots if you don't have to, and although this might sound selfish, but if you can use your allies' HP to do damage and win the game, absolutely go for it. Now onto a more controversial topic, gold ammo. Gold ammo will grant you a massive advantage over people who don't want to spend credits shooting it. If you want to achieve the best results, shooting gold will allow you to penetrate more shots that otherwise would be very unlikely or impossible to penetrate. For most high tier tanks, you still need weak spot knowledge to make effective use of gold shells. The reason why you see Unicums almost exclusively shoot only gold is that they don't like relying on RNG in deciding whether they're gonna penetrate a weak spot or not. Learn how spotting mechanics work. Wargaming made a very good explanatory video about this, so I'm gonna show you the most important stuff that they covered.
Just like a movie starts with a trailer, tank concealment starts with checkpoints, which determine when the enemy is spotted. Each vehicle has 7 checkpoints. 5 of them are purely visibility checkpoints, and the remaining 2 are also view range ports. Their arrangement on tanks follows the same principle. There are visibility checkpoints on all hull sides, and one at the point where the gun is attached to the turret. One view range port is at the center of the vehicle at the top, and the other is at the point where the gun is attached to the turret. The latter is a dynamic port and moves together with the turret. View range ports emit vision rays that search for enemy checkpoints within a radius of 50 to 445 meters. If the enemy concealment value is not enough to hide them, they will be spotted. For the server, this is a whole web of events which inextricably links the one who spots with the one who is spotted. The vision rays from the view range ports hit only the visible checkpoints of the enemy vehicle. The number of emitted vision rays is limited only by the number of enemy vehicles in battle. This rule works in the opposite direction as well. Knowing how this works is valuable information in real battles. If you need to spot the enemy during a skirmish, many do it this way. They show their checkpoint first when their view range port is still behind cover. So they are dealt unnecessary amounts of damage, though deservedly. But you can avoid it by using the knowledge you've just received. As we now know, there's a dynamic view range port in the turret that can spot enemies from behind cover. In this way, you can remain hidden and keep your precious hit points. You should always keep this in mind in positional fights.
On top of all this, the maximum spotting distance is 445 meters, but your tank can have more view range than this, and thus having more basically reduces the enemy's camouflage. So essentially, the more view range you have, the more enemies you will be able to spot. As for the camouflage, when it comes to light tanks, you should stack as much camo as possible while having around 500 meters of view range. If you're into maths and formulas and want to understand how camo works exactly, pause the video here and look at the different calculations. If you are serious about improving, checking your own replays, especially after bad games, can be insanely helpful. You have to be very critical with yourself and make sure to not repeat those mistakes ever again in the next game. There's a super OP habit you can pick up, which is basically unzooming after every shot and instantly checking your surroundings. This allows you to have increased awareness and you can avoid most unpleasant surprises. I created an aiming tutorial some time ago on YouTube. I'm just gonna show you the important parts again here. Pay careful attention as I try putting all my brain power into this back in the day. Number 1. I have seen countless replays and streamers who just have way too high sensitivity. This makes them miss much more shots simply because of the inaccuracy created by this. You can fix this by lowering your DPI and mouse sensitivity, and the lower it is, the more accurate you will get. I am playing with 800 DPI and you can look at my sensitivity settings here. It's very important though, in case you're playing with a high sensitivity, to not lower your sensitivity by a drastic amount instantly. Instead, opt for a more gradual approach and just start lowering it bit by bit, all the way until you still feel comfortable. Number 2. By enabling server reticle, you will be able to track your opponents much better and fire exactly when your reticle is on their weak spots. Simply because this option enables you to see server lag all the time, aka you won't be missing shots because of some momentarily connection lag between you and the server. This happens all the time with people that use client reticle. For example, they turn a corner on Himmelsdorf and they already see that they can shoot the enemy on the corner, yet they are unaware that their reticle is still lagging behind the wall, thus missing a crucial, potentially game-changing shot. Don't be like one of those guys. The rule of exception here is to disable server reticle in case you're having more than 80 ping, because it is going to be very laggy, thus using client reticle and calculating the lag in your head will do a better job. Number 3. How do you aim so well and hit the enemy's tiny weak spots constantly? The answer is very simple and I'm going to show you how. Aiming for weak spots or cupolas in World of Tanks consists of 3 types of different aiming. When the enemy is stationary, aka doesn't move, you just have to find their weak spots that are most susceptible to damage. Try to fully aim until your reticle has completely shrank and just fire to hit it. If the enemy is moving their cupola and you don't really have a clear shot at the other weak spots, simply wait for them to drive into your crosshair and fire. For easier understanding and to describe better what I said, here's a clip of me shooting a wiggling E5 in the cupola. You can notice that he's putting his gun up and is presenting me with a hard target, since his gun can soak up my heat shells for no damage, plus I can also miss due to the constant motion of his wiggling. You can see I am aiming at one spot and waiting for him to move into my reticle, only firing once I am sure that he lets down his guard a bit and I will hit him. In other words, when the enemy is moving at a closer range, you should try to hold your aim while slightly adjusting it to line up with their cupola and predict where their cupola is going to be after they move. You should fire when the cupola is lined up exactly with your reticle. Game modifications or mods. Do I recommend using any? The only mod that will definitely give you an advantage is the Battle Hits mod. You can open it in your garage and you can look at all the shots that either you or your enemies did and hit their targets. You can also use battle hits mod to check how the enemies penetrated you after the battle. It can help you understand your tanks better, and it will show you some weak spots you didn't know you had and allow you to hide them in future encounters. If you are a competitive player, I would recommend installing a Mark of Excellence mod, which will show you your mark percentage in battles. You can always know how much damage you need to get closer to the gun marks you want, and also tell you whether you have more spotting or tracking damage at the time. The controversial Better Reticle mod has gained popularity recently. It claims that the normal reticle size in World of Tanks is wrong and the actual reticle size is a lot smaller. For some, it might make close range brawls easier, but at mid to long ranges, it makes you extremely lazy when it comes to aiming, as you may snapshot a lot more often due to the perception of increased accuracy. Apart from these, nothing gives you a significant advantage. If you are playing a bush position and you're spawning enemy tanks, make sure to back out of the bush periodically, since the enemies will most likely blind fire you at some point. This way you will have a good chance of them missing you. When brawling at close range, pay attention to how an enemy moves their gun when aiming at you. Most of the time you can tell exactly where they are aiming, and you can quickly counteract this by over-angling that spot. And right when they're reloaded and about to fire, you turn to make whatever angle they are aiming at an auto ricochet. For newer players, it is very important to not give up in low tiers. Low tier gameplay can be very frustrating, especially when one is free to play. There are loads of overpowered tanks, and the game balance is quite weak when it comes to certain tanks of those tiers. Most importantly, don't get discouraged by more experienced players spamming OP tanks, aka seal clubbing, or people spamming low tier RTs. You should save your free experience for modules or for skipping unenjoyable tech tree tanks. I recommend watching some gameplay on YouTube or Twitch before you play them to have a good idea of their playstyle. Learn how crew skills, consumables and equipment work. This is extremely important in order to know how to set up your tank in the optimal way and make it work well. If you have questions about this, join my stream at twitch.tv/kajzoo and ask in the chat. I am more than happy to answer any of your questions regarding tank skills and setups, so don't hesitate to come and say hi. Do not listen to toxic people crying in in-game chat. Nobody is born a unicum and everyone goes through the learning process before being good at the game. Sixth Sense is a critical perk for commanders. It alerts you when you are spotted, giving you a chance to react and find cover before the enemy has a clear shot on you. Recently, Wargaming made Sixth Sense automatically available on all tanks, so pay attention to that light bulb popping up on your screen, since it means that you've been spotted. Note that there is always a small delay from the time you actually get spotted and when the bulb lights up. Once spotted, a target will usually stay lit for around 10 seconds if nobody else can see you anymore. Ammo racking and setting certain tanks on fire is super easy. Knowing how to target enemy tanks, ammo racks, and modules can lead to devastating effects. You can use the VOT Armor Inspector to look at where critical modules can be found. In general, most tanks, fuel tanks, can be damaged when shooting them in the rear end of their side. Certain tanks, such as some Soviet tanks, have their fuel tanks right behind their first pocket wheels and lower plates, while British heavies tend to have their ammo racks in the same spot. Know your tanks. This may seem obvious, but you should try and understand the strengths and weaknesses of the tanks you're playing. Different tanks have unique characteristics, and learning these small details will allow you to make better decisions on the battlefield. You should also try and minimize silhouettes. When possible, avoid exposing the full side of your tank to the enemy. Present a smaller target by angling your tank or using the terrain to hide parts of your vehicle. You can also use psychology to try and deduct the next move of your opponents. I am sure you have seen it all happen before too. Once you shoot an enemy and he bounces you a lot of times, that obviously generates a lot of tension and he will be more inclined to outright rush you or go YOLO just to shoot you afterwards. Be wary of this. When you're playing a rare tank, enemies tend to throw away everything in order to get a shot at you, so you also need to pay attention to this too. When sniping at the hill on Prohorovka, for example, people tend to overpeak and get spotted quite a lot. If they don't take any damage for their peaks, they're gonna keep doing them until they eventually do, so you will definitely have a window of opportunity to cause some damage to them. As you play the game, more and more patterns such as these will become known to you. I was thinking about doing a separate video about these psychological tricks. What do you guys think? One of the best tips is learning how to read enemy lineups. This is one of the skills that you will eventually master yourself, but I will give you a few examples of what I mean. When playing Prohorovka or any open maps and the enemy has a better lighting than yours, it is almost always guaranteed that he will get outspotted with a few exceptions, and you will already need to get ready inside to fall back to a position where you will be safe in case your light tank goes under to avoid getting shot by enemies while being perma-spotted. Another example of Malinovka is when you're playing a heavy and you see that the enemies have a lot more faster hull-down heavies than your team, just outright avoid going up the hill, because it is almost always guaranteed that your team will not be able to take the windmill and you will just end up being the breakfast without anyone backing you up in time. Malinovka, double chieftain. Well, Kran, Kong, 2 chieftain. Do we go up? I don't think we can. We got the worst possible spawn, but there's no arty, which is nice. Alright guys, let's rush the middle, man. Let's rush the middle. There are loads more examples like these, and you should actively try and analyze lineups all the time and try to deduct what is the best position and play to do in each and every match. When you are fighting over a corner and the enemy refuses to peek and you desperately need them to do that, you can bait them by turning your turret to the side and pretending you're looking at something else or acting like you have been disconnected. They will most likely peek you, and if you're quick enough, you can finish them off before they get to fire at you. Oh no, he knows the VZ has 2 shells, guys. I'm gonna act like an idiot. Brr. Joke's on you, man. It works every single time. You also need to learn when it comes to multi-target scenarios, aka when you are facing multiple tanks and you need to decide which guys to shoot. If you have a clear shot, the golden rule is to always go for the tanks with higher alpha and auto loaders. If you have a chance to shoot between an ISU 152 or a Black Prince, which one are you gonna go for? How about in case of facing an AMX 50B and a Super Conqueror? Always try and do damage to the tank that means the most threat to you and your team. If you are new, you should work on understanding the different shell types and how they work. You can find many guides and more complete explanations online. But in short, all ammo types will go through obstacles except for heat. AP and APCR will go through spaced armor most of the time if they have enough penetration with no problem, while heat will bounce if shot at spaced armor at an angle. APCR is usually the fastest shell type, so it will make sniping over long distances a lot easier, but it usually also loses the most penetration over distance. Heat and HE shells are unique in terms of this, as they do not lose any penetration value over distance. Avoid shooting tracks with heat and HE, as they will most likely get soaken up. Battles can usually be broken into 3 segments. Please hear what young kajzoo had to say about all this briefly. The first very important step is to segment every battle of yours into 3 parts. The first part is going to be your early game. Here, depending on your tank, you have to get into a position where you can get some sweet early game damage. For example, here I am playing on Glacier and I can shoot all the crossing tanks of the enemy that are trying to get into their positions. Early game damage should be 3-4 shots. Here you have to make sure you do not take any damage in return for your actions, since later on in the battle you have to use your full HP to trade shots with the enemy. The second part should be the mid game. Most of the time, when there is no more damage to be done from your position, from early game damage, seek out where the majority of the enemy tank's HP is and relocate to that flank. This is the golden rule for this segment. Always go where the bulk of the enemy's HP is, but make sure that the HP on that flank is very much accessible considering your own tank's capabilities. So stay mindful of this and do not venture onto the medium line flank with your Guerrilla 15, but if you're playing an Object 140, which you can side script against heavies, you should all the time strive to get into those positions where you can farm all the heavies, either hold down or in the corner. Once again, mitigate the damage dealt and received. In case you are playing against tanks with higher alpha damage than yours, another important thing for you mid-game should also be increased situational awareness. Pay careful attention to the minimap in case your team is falling apart, seek out the best escape route from the flank, rotate to a position from which you can do late game damage. In the final segment of your battles, you should still have HP. Use that HP to catch out turretless TDs that you can double track, thus minimizing incoming damage from them. Most of the time such TDs are full HP, since they camp all game long and rarely take a shot. This means that even if you take a shot from them at the late game, you can most of the time circle them with most tanks in the game and you can double track them, farming the juicy 2000 HP. To sum this up, having HP in late game is definitely a must. There are also 2 stats that you can pad in order to have better segmentation qualities. The first one is average spotted per game, which also obviously correlates to your tank's mobility into making your way into an early position or a flank. Either way, you should aim around 1.4 average spotted enemy tanks per battle. The second metric is your tank's average survival rate per battle. So as I explained you before, the longer you survive, the more damage potential is going to come your way, thus you need to do anything in order to get to the late game. Do not go into careless trades and rotate away from the falling flank if you have to. Try platooning up with better players. Playing with friends who are more experienced than you or forming platoons with other skilled players can increase your coordination and overall effectiveness in battles. When I started playing the game many years ago, I was always looking to platoon with better players, and I was keenly looking at where they went on the map and how they played. You can learn a lot this way too. The beauty of World of Tanks is that no battle goes the exact same way. If you want to become better at the game, it's important to have an open, critical mindset. Learn from your mistakes, since every battle offers lessons that can make you a better player in the long run. Bad RNG, bad teams and bad matchmaking does happen, unfortunately. From time to time, you need to try and to stay calm and positive. If you feel like you're getting tilted, then I would recommend putting the game away for a bit, as you will definitely make way more mistakes while being in this state.
This is it, guys. You see? You see?
Coming back to the game with a fresh mindset can help you perform better, and you can also try switching servers to please RNGs. Remember that becoming proficient in World of Tanks takes time and practice. Don't be discouraged by losses, instead use them as learning opportunities to become a better player, and most importantly, play the game to have fun. This video took roughly 50 hours to produce, so if you liked it and found it useful, please like the video as it helps me massively. I will release the next video within a week if we reach 5,000 likes, and trust me, that one is going to be absolutely insane. I hope these tips will improve your gameplay tremendously, and thank you for watching.